Rejected by a mate, the Omega stood alone until the Alpha King stepped in and claimed her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Sarah Vale had always known she was different. As an Omega in a world where alphas ruled and betas followed, she had always felt like an outsider. But what made her different wasn't just her rank. It was the fact that she couldn't shift. A defect in her blood, something she could never control. Her pack, her family, had long abandoned her because of it. To them, she was a useless Omega, not even worthy of being chosen by a mate. The last rejection, the one that happened just hours ago, had shattered what little hope she had left. At the ritual where mates were chosen, Sarah stood waiting, the cold stone of the Moonspire temple beneath her knees, as the others were claimed. Each alpha and beta stepped forward to accept a mate, but not her. The whispers of her pack filled the air, laced with pity and ridicule. Broken Omega, they murmured. She can't even shift. Sarah's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had hoped, foolishly, perhaps, that this time would be different. But no one had come for her. No one would ever come for her. She was alone. The ceremony ended, and the moonlight outside bathed the temple in a silver glow, but it was a cold light, one that reflected her isolation. The world outside seemed so distant, like a life she could never reach. Her thoughts were interrupted by the creak of the heavy temple door. She glanced up, but no one came through. Her heart skipped a beat as she heard the soft, deliberate footsteps approaching. From the shadows, a figure emerged. He was tall, too tall, and walked with a painful limp, as though every step took every ounce of strength he had. His clothes were simple, dark wool that had seen better days, but there was something about him. His eyes were the color of moonlight, a pale silver that glimmered even in the darkness of the temple. The man paused in front of her, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. He wasn't an alpha from her pack. No one had come for her. Yet here he was, someone completely different, someone who shouldn't even be here. "Are you Sarah Vale?" he asked, his voice low but firm. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with uncertainty. "I am." He didn't say anything for a long moment, his eyes studying her with a strange intensity. Then, slowly, he stepped forward, each movement measured and deliberate. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But you're the one I've been looking for." Sarah blinked, her mind struggling to keep up. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. The man's lips twitched into a half-smile. "I'm Cale Thornridge, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories." The words felt like a shock to her system. The Alpha King, the one everyone feared, the one who had never chosen a mate. "I've been searching for you, Sarah. You are my fated mate." The silence in the temple was suffocating. Sarah's heart was still racing, and her mind couldn't quite comprehend the words that had just been spoken. Alpha King, the one person she had heard so many stories about, the one who was said to be as powerful as he was distant. His presence was like a storm, yet he stood before her, limping, eyes focused solely on her. "What do you mean?" Sarah managed to whisper, her voice betraying the confusion swirling inside her. Cale Thornridge, the Alpha King, took a slow step forward, his silver-gray eyes never leaving hers. The weight of his gaze made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. "I've been looking for you, Sarah." "For a long time," he said, his voice steady but carrying an unmistakable undertone of urgency. "You are the one I've been searching for. My mate." Sarah shook her head in disbelief, taking a small step back. "That's impossible. I've been rejected. No one wants me," she said, her voice barely audible, thick with the pain of the years she had spent being abandoned, first by her family, then by her pack, and now, it seemed, by her own fate. Cale's expression softened, and he took another step toward her, his limp almost imperceptible now. "You've been rejected, yes. But that does not change what is written in the stars," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. "I've never chosen a mate before. But I knew, even before I laid eyes on you, that you were mine." Sarah felt her knees weaken at his words, and she grabbed the stone pillar beside her for support. But I'm nothing, she whispered, her voice raw. I can't shift, I'm not like the others. Kale's eyes softened further, and for the first time, he stepped closer, reaching out to gently touch her arm. You are more than enough, Sarah. Your worth is not defined by what you can or cannot do. I see you, and I have chosen you. His touch was warm, sending a shiver through her, and despite the confusion, despite the fear, a part of her wanted to believe him. He was the Alpha King. He didn't need to choose her. He could have any Omega, any mate, yet here he was, claiming her. But I don't understand, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Why me? Kale's gaze darkened slightly, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his silver eyes. Because I have been cursed, Sarah, and only my fated mate can break that curse. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine, but before she could respond, Kale continued. I know this is a lot to process, but you are not alone anymore. Sarah could barely find her voice. The Alpha King, the one she had been taught to fear and revere, was standing before her, his words pulling her in despite all the doubts she had. What do you want from me? She finally asked, her voice a whisper. Kale's expression softened further, his lips barely curling into a smile. I don't want anything from you, Sarah. I want to give you everything. Protection, a place where you belong, a home, he said, his voice low and comforting. And most of all, I want to give you my heart. His words, so unexpected, so filled with sincerity, were like a balm to her battered soul. She had never felt wanted, never felt worthy. But now, in front of this powerful Alpha King, she felt something she had never dared to hope for: acceptance. I can't promise you everything will be easy, Kale continued, but I promise you that I will never abandon you. You are my mate, and that means something in our world. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel completely alone. I don't know what to say, she admitted quietly, looking up at Kale. He gave her a soft smile, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. You don't have to say anything yet, he said. Just know that I'm here, and I always will be. With those words, Kale took a step back, giving Sarah space to breathe, but his presence remained like an anchor, steady and unwavering. Sarah looked up at him, still processing everything, and despite the confusion, despite her doubts, she felt something stir inside her. Perhaps it wasn't all hopeless. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a future for her after all. As Kale turned to leave the temple, he paused at the doorway and glanced back at her. Come with me, Sarah. Let's start this journey together, he said, his voice soft but commanding. Sarah stood there for a moment, the weight of his words settling over her. She had no idea what the future would hold, but one thing was certain. Her life was about to change forever. The journey to Kale's home felt surreal. Sarah had spent her entire life in the shadows, watching others live with a sense of belonging, a place in the world, while she was left behind, discarded like a broken piece of something nobody needed. Now, she was walking beside the Alpha King, a man she barely knew, but who had just claimed her as his mate. The roads outside Moonspire Temple were quiet. The only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath their feet as they walked through the darkened streets, away from everything Sarah had ever known. Are you all right? Kale's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone gentle but filled with concern. She looked up at him, his silver gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. I'm just trying to process everything, she admitted quietly, glancing down at the ground as they walked. It's a lot to take in. Kale nodded, his expression softening. I understand. It's not easy, Sarah. I didn't expect to find you like this, but now that I have, I'm not going to let you go. His words hung in the air, simple but filled with so much meaning. Sarah didn't know what to say. She wasn't sure if she believed him, but the way he spoke, the sincerity in his voice, made her want to. For the first time in years, she didn't feel completely alone. Thank you, she said softly, the words slipping from her lips before she could think about them. Kale turned his head slightly, his eyes searching hers for a moment before he gave her a reassuring smile. There's no need to thank me. This is where you belong, Sarah. With me. We'll figure everything else out together. Sarah wasn't sure what that meant, but the idea of being with someone who didn't see her as weak or broken was something she never thought she'd experience. As they continued walking, Sarah noticed the way the world seemed to change around her. The streets were darker now, and the sounds of the city had faded, replaced by the quiet rustling of the trees and the chirping of night insects. The air felt different, cooler, somehow more real than the life she had left behind. After what felt like hours, they reached a large, imposing mansion at the edge of the forest. It was a dark, stone structure, with ivy creeping up the walls and a large iron gate that seemed to separate this place from the rest of the world. Cale stopped at the gate and turned to face her. "This is home," he said quietly, his voice low but filled with an undeniable sense of pride. "It's a place where you'll be safe, where you'll never have to hide again." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. This was a world so different from the one she had known. A world where she wasn't an outcast, where she wasn't invisible. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. As they walked through the gate and into the mansion, Sarah couldn't help but glance around, taking in the sights of the grand estate. It was beautiful, in a way that was both overwhelming and comforting. The grand entrance, the large windows, the soft lights spilling from within. It was nothing like the small, cold cottage she had grown up in. Everything here was vast, filled with history, and yet, there was something welcoming about it. "Come on," Cale said, gesturing for her to follow him inside. "You must be tired. We'll get you settled in." Sarah nodded, following him through the door. As they stepped into the foyer, she felt a sense of calm wash over her, and for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she could find a place in this world after all. "This will be your home, Sarah," Cale said, his voice steady as he led her up a grand staircase. "You are my mate, and from this moment on, we'll face everything together." Sarah didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear: her life had changed forever. And for the first time, she was ready to embrace it. She was ready to start over, to build a future with the Alpha King who had claimed her as his own. The mansion was grander than Sarah had ever imagined, its towering stone walls stretching far above her head. As she followed Cale through the corridors, the weight of her new reality began to settle in. This place, this world, was so different from the one she had come from. It was so much bigger, so much more alive. She could feel the eyes of the house staff following her, their glances filled with curiosity. She wasn't used to being noticed like this. Back home, she had always been invisible, an outcast. But here, in this place, it was as if every step she took was under a microscope. She kept her head low, unsure of her place in this new world. "This is where you'll stay." Cale's voice broke her thoughts. He stopped in front of a large door, carved with intricate designs. His hand rested on the handle, but he didn't open it immediately. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said, his voice soft but filled with a certain authority. "But this is your home now, Sarah. You don't have to hide anymore." She looked up at him, her heart racing. "I'm not used to this," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent my whole life trying to stay out of sight. I don't know how to be." She trailed off, unsure of how to finish the sentence. Cale turned to her, his silver-gray eyes filled with understanding. "You don't have to be anything but yourself," he said gently. "That's what I want. You, Sarah. Just you." He opened the door, revealing a room bathed in soft, golden light. It was spacious, with a large four-poster bed draped in rich, dark fabrics. The room was decorated with elegant furniture, but what struck Sarah the most was the view from the window. The vast forest stretched out before her, the moonlight casting a silver glow over the trees. It was breathtaking. Sarah stepped inside, her breath catching in her throat. "This is beautiful," she whispered, her voice full of awe. Cale nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "I want you to be comfortable here, Sarah. This is where you'll rest, where you'll find peace. You are my mate, and that means I will protect you, provide for you. You don't have to worry about anything anymore." Sarah's heart fluttered at his words. She had never experienced this kind of warmth before, this kind of security. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was truly wanted, like she had a place where she belonged. But as she stood there, taking in the room, a thought lingered in the back of her mind. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice shaky. "What do I do now?" Cale walked over to the window and stood beside her, his presence radiating calm. "You take your time, Sarah. You adjust at your own pace. We'll figure everything out together," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. Sarah turned to look at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty and hope. "I don't know how to be the mate of the Alpha King," she admitted. "I don't know how to live in this world." Kale smiled, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to be perfect," he said softly. "Just be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She wasn't alone anymore. Kale was here, and for the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she could finally breathe. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Kale's gaze softened as he looked at her. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You're my mate, Sarah. This is what I've promised you." He paused, his expression serious. "Now rest. Tomorrow is a new day, and we'll take it one step at a time." Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of emotions. As Kale left the room, closing the door gently behind him, she took a deep breath and sat down on the edge of the bed. The soft linens felt like a comfort she had never known. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and the moonlight bathed the room in a soft, silvery glow. It felt like a dream she wasn't sure she deserved, but one that was finally hers. And for the first time in her life, Sarah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find happiness here, in the arms of the Alpha King. The next few days passed in a blur for Sarah. She spent her time settling into the grand mansion, exploring its many rooms, and getting used to the quiet luxury that surrounded her. The place was vast, with hallways that seemed to stretch on forever, and every corner held a story. The servants were kind but distant, and Sarah could feel their eyes on her whenever she passed. It was as if they were waiting for her to slip up, to show that she didn't belong here. But no one spoke a word to her, and she focused on the quiet routine of her new life. Kale, however, was never far. He would visit her room each day, checking in on her, making sure she was comfortable, and even taking her on small walks around the estate. Each time he was near, Sarah's heart would race, her thoughts swirling with a mix of confusion and hope. She had never expected to be in this position, to be the mate of the Alpha King. She had never imagined that someone like him, so powerful and regal, could see something in her worth claiming. "How are you feeling today?" Kale asked one afternoon as they walked along the edge of the forest. The air was crisp, and the trees rustled softly in the wind. He had a gentle smile on his face, but Sarah could see the intensity in his eyes, as if he were waiting for her answer to something more than just a simple question. She glanced at him, her heart beating a little faster. I'm adjusting," she said carefully, trying to find the right words. "But it's all so new. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this." Kale nodded, his expression softening. "I understand. It's a lot to take in. But I want you to know, Sarah, you don't have to rush. You can take your time. We're in this together." His words were like a balm to her soul. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had someone who truly understood her, who wasn't just seeing her for what she could offer, but for who she was. The weight of her past seemed to lift a little, and she felt herself relax in his presence. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Kale smiled warmly at her. "You don't need to thank me. You're my mate. This is what I promised. No one will hurt you here. I'll make sure of it." His words were a promise, one she had never dared to dream of. The days grew easier, and Sarah found herself slowly opening up to Kale. They spent time together, talking about their pasts, their hopes, and their dreams. Sarah learned that Kale had been raised in a world of power and expectation, where every decision he made was scrutinized by others. He had known loss, pain, and the burden of leadership, just as she had known rejection and loneliness. But it was in their shared moments, the quiet conversations under the moonlit sky, that Sarah felt the connection between them deepen. She didn't understand it fully yet, but she felt it, a bond that was undeniable, one that grew stronger with every passing day. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah began to find a sense of peace in the mansion, in her new life with Kale. The once overwhelming reality of being an Omega, of being the Alpha King's mate, slowly became something she could accept. She wasn't just the outcast anymore. She wasn't alone. And for the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she could belong, like she could finally have a future. But even in the midst of this new life, doubts still lingered in her mind. What did it mean to be the mate of the Alpha King? What was expected of her? And could she truly be the person he believed she was? As she sat by the window one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by the soft knock on her door. She turned, startled, and saw Cale standing in the doorway. His presence was always comforting, yet tonight, there was something in his eyes that made her heart flutter. "Are you busy?" he asked, his voice gentle. Sarah shook her head. "No, not at all." Cale stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He walked over to where she sat, a small smile on his lips. "I wanted to talk to you about something," he said, his tone serious now. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, her mind racing with possibilities. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Cale sat beside her, his hand gently taking hers. "I know this is a lot for you, but I need you to understand something," he said quietly. "You are not just my mate. You are the future Luna of this pack, and with that comes great responsibility. I need you to be ready for that." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had known this day would come, but hearing it from Cale made it feel all the more real. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Cale's grip on her hand tightened, and he turned to face her, his eyes filled with determination. "You don't have to be ready yet, but you will be, and I'll be with you every step of the way." Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and the love that lay there. She knew, in that moment, that she wasn't alone anymore. Whatever the future held, she would face it with Cale by her side. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she could finally have the life she had always dreamed of. The days following their conversation were filled with quiet reflection for Sarah. She spent her time learning more about the life that lay ahead of her, about the pack, and what being Cale's mate truly meant. The mansion had become a place of comfort, a far cry from the loneliness she had once known. The grand hallways now seemed less intimidating, the rooms less cold. Yet, despite the warmth of the mansion and the presence of Cale, doubts still lingered in the back of Sarah's mind. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the responsibility that came with being the Luna of a pack, and every time she glanced at Cale, she could see the weight of that expectation in his eyes. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and the golden light filled the room, Cale found her standing by the window, looking out at the distant mountains. "You're thinking again," he said, his voice warm as he approached her. Sarah turned to face him, forcing a smile. "I don't mean to," she replied quietly. "It's just, everything feels so overwhelming. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this. For being Luna." Cale walked over to her, his steps measured but filled with purpose. He stopped beside her, looking out the window with her. "I never said it would be easy," he said softly, his voice low, yet steady. "But you're exactly who I need, Sarah. You may not see it now, but you're stronger than you think." Sarah shook her head, feeling the uncertainty rise within her once again. "But I've spent my whole life being invisible. I've never had the chance to learn what it means to lead, to be a part of something bigger. How can I possibly do that now?" Cale turned to her, his silver-gray eyes locking onto hers with a depth of emotion she hadn't seen before. "Because you're not alone anymore. And you've never been invisible to me. I chose you for a reason, Sarah. I've seen your strength, your kindness, and the way you care for those around you. That's all we need. You don't have to change who you are. You just have to trust yourself." His words, simple and sincere, seemed to settle over her like a blanket, warm and comforting. For the first time in days, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this. She wasn't alone. She wasn't invisible. And Cale, the Alpha King, believed in her. "I want to believe that," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "But what if I fail?" Cale reached out, taking her hand gently in his. "You won't fail, Sarah. We're in this together. I'll be here with you every step of the way. No matter what comes, we'll face it together." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, and for the first time, Sarah felt the weight of her fears lift slightly. She didn't have to do this alone. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to say this, but I'm scared. I've never had someone like you in my life." Cale gave her a soft smile, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "And you never will again. I'm here for you, Sarah. Always." Sarah didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. With Cale by her side, maybe she could finally start believing in herself. Maybe she could finally start to live, not as the outcast Omega she had been, but as the woman she was becoming, a woman worthy of love, respect, and a future she could embrace. As the night fell, She found herself resting beside Kale, their hands intertwined as they sat in silence, the peacefulness of the moment settling over them. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she didn't need them. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The days passed by quietly as Sarah continued to adjust to her new life at the mansion. The once overwhelming luxury of the place had started to feel more like home, though she still struggled to shake off the feeling of being out of place. Kale remained a constant presence in her life, checking on her daily and ensuring she had everything she needed. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, but Sarah couldn't ignore the lingering uncertainty that clung to her. She had come from nothing, and now, she was expected to become someone important, someone who could stand beside the Alpha King, lead a pack, and carry the weight of expectations that came with being his mate. Some nights, as she lay awake in the large bed that felt too big for her, she would find herself staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was truly ready for all of this. She wasn't sure if anyone could ever be ready for such a dramatic change. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Kale found her standing outside, her hands resting lightly on the stone railing that overlooked the forest. He approached quietly, not wanting to disturb her, but his presence was enough to draw her attention. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his voice full of concern. Sarah turned to face him, her heart lifting at the sight of him. "I'm fine," she said, offering him a small smile. "Just thinking." Kale nodded, stepping closer to her. "About what?" he asked, his voice gentle yet insistent. Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking, her thoughts spilling out in a quiet rush. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I'm the right person for all of this. I'm not like you. I've never had the kind of strength it takes to lead." Kale reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Sarah, you are exactly who you need to be. You don't have to be like anyone else. You don't have to lead the way I do. Just lead with your heart, and that's enough." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes searching his for any hint of doubt, but there was none. His words, simple as they were, brought a warmth to her chest that she couldn't ignore. "But what if I make a mistake? What if I'm not good enough?" she whispered. Kale smiled softly, his eyes filled with compassion. "Then we'll fix it together. You're not alone in this, Sarah. I'm here with you, and I always will be." His words, so full of assurance and love, calmed the storm in her heart. Sarah felt the weight of her fears lessen, and for the first time, she truly believed him. Maybe she wasn't perfect, but she didn't need to be. All she needed was to be herself, and that was enough for Kale. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. Kale nodded, his hand still resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank me," he replied, his voice low and steady. "You're my mate, Sarah. I will always be here for you." They stood there for a few moments, the sound of the evening breeze rustling through the trees around them. Sarah felt a sense of peace she had never known before. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, she felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time in her life, she wasn't carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. With Kale by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready for this new life. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Kale turned to her with a smile. "Come inside. It's getting late, and we have much to discuss tomorrow." Sarah nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Together, they walked back into the mansion, ready to face the future side by side. The following days seemed to blur together for Sarah, each one bringing a mix of uncertainty and quiet moments of peace. She spent more time with Kale, getting to know him not just as the Alpha King, but as the man who had claimed her as his mate. They would take long walks around the estate, talking about everything and nothing at all. At night, they would sit together by the fireplace, the warmth of the fire creating a sense of calm that Sarah had never known. With each passing moment, the bond between them grew stronger, but so did Sarah's doubts. She had spent so much of her life being invisible, abandoned by her family and her pack. How could she possibly live up to the expectations of being the Lunar of the pack, the Alpha King's mate? It felt like a dream that she wasn't sure she deserved. One evening, as they sat together in the drawing room, Kale noticed the far-off look in her eyes. He set his drink down and turned toward her, his gaze soft. "Sarah, what's on your mind?" he asked gently, his voice full of concern. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to voice the turmoil inside her. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Be Luna. Be the mate of the Alpha King. I'm not like the others. I don't know how to lead. How can I possibly fill that role? Kale reached out, taking her hand in his, the warmth of his touch grounding her. Sarah, you don't have to be like anyone else, he said firmly, his voice filled with quiet strength. You are enough as you are. I chose you not because of what you can do, but because of who you are. Your heart, your kindness, your strength, they are all I need. You're already everything I've ever wanted. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat at his words. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that she could be enough, but the weight of her past still hung heavily on her shoulders. I've spent so many years feeling like I'm not enough, she said, her voice thick with emotion. How can I suddenly be the person everyone looks to? Kale's grip on her hand tightened, his gaze never wavering. You're not alone in this, Sarah, he said softly. We'll figure it out together. You don't have to carry everything on your own. As your mate, I'm here to support you, to help you find your way. His words, so sincere, filled her with a sense of warmth she had never known before. Kale wasn't asking her to be someone she wasn't. He was asking her to be herself. That was all he had ever wanted. Slowly, Sarah began to let go of the fear that had been holding her back. Maybe she wasn't meant to be the perfect Luna, the perfect mate. But maybe, just maybe, she could be the best version of herself. And with Kale by her side, she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself becoming more comfortable in her role. She spent time with the pack, learning from the other women, and gaining their trust. Slowly but surely, she started to see her place in this new world, not as someone who was out of place, but as someone who belonged. One evening, as she sat beside Kale in the garden, watching the stars twinkle overhead, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The weight of her doubts had lifted, replaced with a quiet confidence. Thank you, she whispered, her voice soft with gratitude. Kale turned to her, his eyes filled with love and understanding. You don't have to thank me, Sarah, he said gently. I've always believed in you. You just needed to believe in yourself. Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with affection for the man beside her. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but with Kale by her side, she was ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would build a future, a life that neither of them had ever dreamed possible. And, for the first time in her life, Sarah knew that she truly belonged. She was no longer the invisible Omega. She was the mate of the Alpha King, and that was enough. As the weeks passed, Sarah continued to grow into her role beside Kale. The mansion, which had once seemed so overwhelming and foreign, now felt like home. The pack had begun to accept her more, and with each passing day, Sarah's confidence grew. She still had moments of doubt, moments when the weight of her responsibilities as Luna felt too much to bear, but Kale was always there, steady and unwavering, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue across the garden, Sarah sat outside in the quiet peace of the evening. She was lost in her thoughts when she felt a presence beside her. Kale's silhouette appeared in the doorway, his eyes soft and full of warmth. I thought I'd find you here, he said, his voice calm and familiar. Sarah looked up at him and smiled, her heart swelling with affection. I come here when I need to think, she replied, her voice steady. It's peaceful here. Kale walked over and sat beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. You've come a long way, Sarah, he said quietly, his voice filled with pride. I see the change in you, the woman you've become. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had always been afraid of being seen as weak, of never being enough. But with Kale, she had found the strength to embrace who she was, flaws and all. I'm still learning, she said, her voice soft. There are times when I wonder if I'm doing the right thing, if I'm truly ready for all of this. Kale turned to her, his eyes filled with understanding. No one is ever truly ready for everything that comes with this life, he said, his voice steady. But I know one thing for sure. You are the right person for this. You were always meant to be my mate, to stand beside me as we lead together. Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and love there. For the first time in her life, she truly believed him. She had spent so long doubting herself, believing that she wasn't worthy of love or acceptance. But with Kale, She felt like she had finally found her place. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Kale smiled, his hand gently squeezing hers. "You don't have to thank me," he said softly. "I chose you because you are everything I need, and I will never ask you to be anyone other than who you are." As the evening grew darker, the stars beginning to twinkle in the sky above, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. The doubts that had once plagued her no longer held the same weight. She was no longer the girl who had been rejected and abandoned. She was the mate of the Alpha King, a woman who was strong enough to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With Kale by her side, she knew she could face the future with courage. The pack, her responsibilities, and the life that stretched out before her didn't seem as daunting anymore. She wasn't alone in this. She had found a partner, someone who believed in her, and together, they would build a future. As they sat there in the quiet of the garden, Sarah realized that this was only the beginning of her journey. She had so much more to learn, so much more to discover, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready to embrace it all. She was no longer hiding in the shadows. She was standing beside Kale, and that was all she needed to feel whole. The night air was cool, but with Kale beside her, Sarah felt warmth that could carry her through anything. The future was uncertain, but it no longer felt frightening. It felt like an adventure waiting to unfold. And with Kale by her side, Sarah knew she could face whatever came next, together.